Good afternoon and good morning. Welcome to today's conference, Building Hydrogen Corridors in the Pacific West for a Carbon Neutral Future. This program is hosted by the New Energy and Industrial Technology Development Organization and the Japan External Trade Organization. My name is Taku Yamashita, Chief Executive Director of JETRO San Francisco. I will be your MC for today. This event is a two-part program on how Pacific West states and provinces approach hydrogen in their clean energy policies and how the Japanese industry is partnering with the local sector to build transportation and the power infrastructure centered around hydrogen economy. In session 1 today, we will hear from distinguished guests and speakers about policies and actions that Pacific West governments are using to lay the foundation for a clean energy future with hydrogen. We will also hear about national policy frameworks on hydrogen in both the US and Japan. In session 2 on December the 6th, experts from businesses and organizations in the Pacific West region in Japan will address private sector challenges and opportunities for building a new clean hydrogen industry. We will also highlight case studies on commercially viable hydrogen projects during session 2. We hope this program gives you a better understanding of the versatility of hydrogen as a transportation fuel and a utility power source. We also hope to provide an opportunity for networking between businesses, industry groups, and governments on both sides of the Pacific. Now, without further ado, I would like to start this program. Please note that we will accept questions from the audience only during the panel discussion scheduled at the end of today's session due to time constraints. To begin with, representatives of NEDO and JETRO, the organizers of this event, will give opening remarks. NEDO and JETRO are non-profit entities organized and managed by the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, a ministry of the Japanese government that focuses on economics and industrial development through innovation, technology, and foreign investment. The first speaker is Mr. Shuji Yumitori, Executive Director of NEDO. Mr. Yumitori, the floor is yours.
Good evening to everyone in the United States and Canada, and good morning to everyone in Japan. My name is Shuji Yumitori, and I am an Executive Director of NEDO. First, I'd like to offer my sincere thanks to the many participants in this webinar. On behalf of the co-organizers of this hydrogen conference, I'd like to say a few words. In holding this event, I'd like to express my sincere gratitude once again to the many high-level government officials, first to those joining us as presenters from the Japan side, MUTO Akira, Consul General of Japan in Los Angeles, Mogi Tadashi, Director General, Agency for Natural Resources and Energy, METI, SONE Ichiro, Executive Vice President, JETRO. And as presenters from North America side, Elizabeth Urbanas, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Asia and Americas, U.S. Department of Energy, Kate Brown, Governor, State of Oregon, Jay Inslee, Governor, State of Washington, Eleni Kounalakis, Lieutenant Governor, State of California, Bruce Ralston, Minister of Energy, Mines, and Low Carbon Innovation, Province of British Columbia, as well as to the many leading figures from companies and research institutes in the United States, Canada, and Japan, who will give us thought-provoking presentations from their perspectives. NEDO is Japan's government agency that aims to address energy and environmental problems and enhance industrial technology. Since its establishment in 1980, NEDO has promoted R&D in various energy fields to achieve these objectives. NEDO has also contributed to solving energy and environmental issues around the world through international collaborations and projects. Currently, NEDO and GoBiz of California, in collaboration with SDG&E in San Diego, are conducting a demonstration of a redox flow battery developed by Sumitomo Electric Industries Limited. In addition, an EV charger project, which aimed to expand the use of EVs from Monterey to Lake Tahoe since 2016, concluded this February. Furthermore, in North America, with the cooperation of local governments, NEDO has demonstrated technologies of Japanese companies in Hawaii, Texas, and also in Canada. The world now has a common understanding that hydrogen, the theme of this event, is an indispensable energy source for a decarbonized society. Japan is proud of having many leading hydrogen technologies. We believe that we can make a global contribution by implementing these technologies in society as soon as possible. In Japan, NEDO began operating a water electrolysis system with a capacity of 10 megawatts using renewable energy at Fukushima Hydrogen Energy Research Field, constructed in March 2020. In cooperation with overseas countries, NEDO aims to establish an international hydrogen supply chain. We are carrying out a project for marine transportation of liquefied hydrogen between Australia and Japan within this fiscal year. Since last May, we have been demonstrating fixing hydrogen into a chemical substance and transporting it from Brunei to Japan for power generation fuel. In California, NEDO is pursuing two feasibility studies. The first one is to convert the power source of port equipment to fuel cells at the Port of Los Angeles with Toyota Tsusho Corporation. The second one is hydrogen production using waste plastics with JGC Holdings Corporation. Based on the result of Port of Los Angeles study, I'd like to announce that we decided to start technology demonstration project from this year. We recognize that such international cooperation is extremely important to respond to global climate change. We believe that cooperation between the West Coast and Japan, which are practically neighbors and only separated by the Pacific Ocean, will be the key to realize an international hydrogen society. I hope this hydrogen conference will provide a platform where we can share what we are doing to confront climate change together and to build new collaborative relationships. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yumitori, for explaining NEDO's work related to hydrogen. The next speaker is Mr. Ichiro SONE, Executive Vice President of JETRO. Mr. SONE, you have the floor.
Well, thank you, Yamashita-san. Hello, everyone. I'd like to express gratitude to all participants joining us today, including many distinguished speakers as introduced. I'm sure you're all well aware of the global trend toward introducing renewable energy with the goal of carbon neutrality. Under the leadership of then Prime Minister Suga, Japan declared last October that it will achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. The United States declared the same in January. Current Prime Minister Kishida inherited this policy and reiterated at the recent COP26 summit Japan's intention of building a decarbonized society. It's not too much to say that hydrogen energy is vital to realizing carbon neutrality. It is a true pleasure for us to jointly hold this event, which will enable us to deepen collaboration between Japan, the United States, and Canada in such a crucial area together with NEDO. Collaboration in hydrogen energy is already happening. The other day, the California town Lancaster and Namie Town in Fukushima signed the Declaration of Municipal Partnership for Hydrogen Advancement of Smart Sister Cities. The two cities have committed to decarbonization by working together with various partners to expand the use of hydrogen. They are calling for other municipalities to join them as well. Such collaboration will be carried out at every level in both the public and private sectors. We at JETRO will be truly honored if today's event becomes a catalyst toward this end. JETRO will also play a contributing role in achieving carbon neutrality. In September, we launched a business platform called J-Bridge for overseas startups and Japanese companies to work together. We are also helping Japanese companies to work together with overseas companies, focusing on technologies contributing to decarbonization. We support progress in hydrogen field in other ways. JETRO helped First Element Fuel, which has America's largest hydrogen station network, to get funding from Mitsui & Company, JBIC, and Mitsubishi UFJ Bank. Furthermore, we're helping the Port of Los Angeles to decarbonize. The port has been selected as an advanced model for port decarbonization in a Quad framework. If any of today's participants want to hear more about such activities, please contact us at JETRO in San Francisco, Los Angeles, or your nearest JETRO office. Lastly, I'd like to again thank the many people joining us today. I will finish by expressing my hope that this event will stimulate further collaboration in hydrogen utilization between Japan and the Pacific West. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. SONE, for sharing with the audience information on JETRO's contribution to achieving carbon neutrality, including the promotion of hydrogen energy. I hope the audience found this information helpful, and please feel free to contact NEDO and JETRO at any time to discuss ways in which we may be able to support your business. Now, we are delighted to welcome 5 distinguished guests. We will have opening greetings from representatives on behalf of Japan, California, Washington, Oregon, and British Columbia. Please welcome our first guest, Mr. MUTO, Consul General of Japan in Los Angeles. Consul General, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you all for joining this conversation. It is my great fortune to be able to serve right where the US-Japan relationship is strongest and where the history of our relationship is deepest. There is no region of the United States where ideas and elements of culture from Japan have made such a strong positive impression. As Mayor Eric Garcetti has often said, Japan is one of the city of LA's near neighbors to the west, and I believe neighbors can help each other. When Los Angeles was choking on air pollution up to 1970s, children spent their childhood not even knowing that there were beautiful mountains to the north of the city. According to one Peterson Auto Museum exhibit, when LA suffered its first severe smog event in 1943, citizens believed it to be a Japanese chemical attack. However, in 1975, the first automaker that could meet the strict new air quality standards for California was Honda. And from that day forward, automakers from Japan have been helping to guide the way to a cleaner and more energy efficient future here in California and throughout the world. Now, the world is mobilizing to control greenhouse gas pollutants of all kinds. And again, California and the city of Los Angeles are at ground zero for testing and rolling new ideas. This is where I believe that once again, Los Angeles and California can benefit from some new ideas coming from Japan. And that is the topic of today's discussion, hydrogen society, hydrogen energy. Japan is keenly serious about creating a hydrogen society, and we believe that we have all of the appropriate elements in place. Former Prime Minister Suga declared that Japan will be carbon neutral by year 2050. Current Prime Minister Kishida reiterated this commitment at the recent COP26 summit in Scotland. About $2 billion per year has been earmarked for support of new green technology initiatives in Japan, with hydrogen energy as a centerpiece technology. And we have targeted year 2030 as the start of a hydrogen society in Japan. Japan's efforts on this will be detailed expertly in today's program. But I do wish to send a special message to the city of Los Angeles and to California. I believe that Japan should not build a hydrogen society on its own, and Japan is ready to collaborate. If we work together, we can join forces in building a hydrogen energy industry, perhaps by establishing a hydrogen value chain model with a flagship project at the LA port. And we can work together to promote a hydrogen-related clusters of activities, spreading hydrogen society from Los Angeles to the rest of the United States and beyond. It would be my hope to add a new chapter at the Petersen Automobile Museum with Japanese hydrogen cars on display, describing how greenhouse gas emissions were brought under control in Los Angeles and California with the help of Japanese technology. Thank you. Thank you very much again. Please enjoy today's discussion.
Thank you so much, Consul General MUTO, for your warm greetings. I'm glad that you reiterated the good relationship that Japan and the Pacific West have made and the importance of working together to build a hydrogen energy economy for both ends of the Pacific. Representatives of the 4 US states and Canadian provinces featured here have provided special video greetings for the program today. First, we have a message from Lieutenant Governor of California, Eleni Kounalakis.
Hello, I'm California Lieutenant Governor Eleni Kounalakis. It is a great honor to be with you all today and for the opportunity to share California's perspective at this conference. I'd like to begin by thanking our hosts, the New Energy and Industrial Technology Development Organization of Japan and the Japan External Trade Organization. Over the years, NEDO and JETRO have been indispensable partners to many California companies and to the state of California. Thank you for convening this important conference and for inviting me to speak. The topic being discussed today, building hydrogen corridors in the Pacific West for a carbon neutral future, could not be more timely or more important. Last month, the United Nations Climate Conference in Glasgow concluded with a new agreement to curb greenhouse gas emissions and decarbonize our economies. The agreement marked an important step forward in our global fight against climate change. I had the opportunity to represent California in Glasgow, and to me, the one thing that came across clearly from all the participants is we need to be bold and aggressive if we are to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. That makes the focus of this conference even more important. We do not have a moment to lose. We need to decarbonize transportation and industrial sectors of our economies. We need to scale up climate solutions like green hydrogen and zero-emission vehicles. And we need to accelerate our partnerships across all levels of government and with the private sector if we are going to prevent a global catastrophe. Our path forward depends on cooperation. California is particularly excited to be part of this conference because we know that hydrogen presents a very promising way to decarbonize our economies and meet our climate goals. California has set ambitious climate goals, including becoming carbon neutral and powering our state with 100% carbon-free electricity by 2045. And last year, Governor Newsom signed an executive order requiring all new vehicles sold in California to be zero-emission vehicles by 2035. California is working hard to meet these goals by implementing policies and making investments that support the transition to clean energy economy. In our last budget, California invested $15 billion in climate resiliency, including $3.9 billion to accelerate zero-emission vehicle adoption. Those funds will be used to put zero-emission trucks and buses on the roads, to support the necessary electric vehicle and hydrogen fueling infrastructure. Those investments are on top of the over $160 million California has already invested in hydrogen fueling infrastructure. California has the largest concentration of hydrogen fuel cell vehicles in the United States, and that market is likely to expand rapidly as we work to meet our 2035 ZEV goal. I'm also very keen to participate in this conference because California sees tremendous opportunities in developing a deeper partnership with Japan. Japan is already one of California's most valued international partners. Japan is our #1 source of foreign direct investment, and we import more goods from Japan than any other state. Beyond our intertwined economies, we also share fundamental values and strong cultural ties that make Japan a natural partner in our clean energy efforts. On the topic of a hydrogen economy, Japan is a global leader, and we have a lot to learn. The governments represented at this conference, Japan, California, Oregon, Washington, and British Columbia, are primed to tackle the biggest challenges ahead of us. To create a clean hydrogen economy, we will need to deploy technologies at scale and support an ecosystem of users, manufacturers, and investors needed to drive down the costs. Through conferences like this one, I believe we can overcome these challenges. I'd like to conclude my remarks by making a pitch. Because Japan is such an important partner to the state of California, the governor and I decided to organize our first international business investment delegation since the pandemic started to go to Japan. We are planning on going in March 2022, provided COVID-19 conditions permit such travel. We hope to take a delegation of business leaders led by me and senior members of the Newsom administration to focus on clean energy, hydrogen, and agriculture. We are planning our delegation visit to coincide with the Smart Energy Week trade show in Tokyo, which will be held March 16th through March 18th. For all businesses interested in learning more about Smart Energy Week or our delegation trip, I encourage you to reach out to the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. They can provide you with the details and see if the state can provide financial support to you to attend the trade show. Thank you to NEDO and JETRO for convening this important conference, and I wish you all a productive and inspiring conference. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lieutenant Governor Kounalakis, for your cordial and informative speech. You explained a solid commitment to decarbonize the economy in California by actively implementing clean energy policies, including hydrogen. You also reiterated the importance of collaborating with Japan in this area. I'm very thrilled to hear you announce that next March, you will lead the first international business investment delegation to Japan since the pandemic started, provided the COVID-19 conditions permit the travel. Hydrogen is one of the 3 focus areas for the trip, Thank you again, Lieutenant Governor Kounalakis. The following guest is Governor Jay Inslee of Washington State.
Hi, Governor Jay Inslee here. Hey, thank you to our partners in Japan, NEDO and JETRO, for hosting this important conversation about building hydrogen corridors and infrastructure in the Pacific Northwest. As you know, Washington State has a strong set of policies in place to drive decarbonization across our economy, including a 100% clean electricity standard, a clean fuel standard, and a cap and invest program that will cap and reduce emissions. And it will invest an estimated $1 billion a biennium into clean energy and resilient communities. These tools provide a strong foundation for driving the development and adoption of a wide range of clean technologies, including hydrogen. Washington State is committed to working with utilities, industries, federal agencies, and other stakeholders to explore developing hydrogen production for high-value uses as a complement to electrification and other decarbonization strategies. We expect hydrogen to potentially have an important role to play in the hard-to-decarbonize sectors of our economy, including industry and heavy transport. Washington is a leader on climate policy and a leader on clean energy innovation, development, and deployment. We already have companies in Washington leading on hydrogen technology, including First Mode, whose chief operating officer is speaking later in your program, which has built the power plant for the world's largest fuel cell truck used in mining, demonstrating the potential of hydrogen as a fuel source for heavy-duty transportation. To drive innovation and take advantage of the economic development opportunities in hydrogen, Washington State's Department of Commerce recently awarded Washington State University's CHARGE Consortium, whose director, Dr. Aaron Fever, is also part of today's program, an innovation cluster acceleration grant to bring together government, academia, and industry to help understand these opportunities. I appreciate that all of you are leaning into innovation and partnerships to ensure our net zero carbon future. We will need all the tools in our toolbox to accomplish this great challenge of decarbonizing our economy. And we know that hydrogen is one important tool. So thank you. I wish you all success in this important work. Good luck.
Thank you, Governor Inslee, for sharing information on a set of policies to drive decarbonization in Washington. We would like to work together to explore developing hydrogen production and usage as an essential complement to electrification. Next, we have a message from Governor Kate Brown of Oregon State.
Hello, everyone. This is Oregon's Governor, Kate Brown. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to join this webinar and support the discussion fostered by the Japan External Trade Organization and the New Energy and Industrial Technology Development Organization. All of us here understand that in order to avert the worst impacts of climate change, we must reduce global carbon emissions by 2050. This is a goal we all need to work towards, and I'm so proud of our ongoing efforts in Oregon. Since becoming governor in 2015, I've been committed to climate action and building a more sustainable Oregon. While we are a small state, we are taking steps forward that will help change the story of the climate crisis. At the same time, we are growing our economy and creating green jobs. Over the last 5 years, we've led the United States in banning coal from the electricity supply, in electric vehicle adoption, and in the transition to cleaner fuels. In July of 2021, I signed state legislation which will move Oregon to 100% clean electricity by 2040, the most ambitious and most aggressive clean energy timeline in the United States, hands down. This legislation will help develop local clean energy jobs while strengthening equity and resilience, especially for our Black, Indigenous, tribal, and communities of color, as well as our rural and low-income communities. Renewable hydrogen will be a key tool in the toolkit to achieve 100% clean electricity in Oregon, and of course, in the larger global clean energy economy. Hydrogen storage cells and hydrogen-fueled vehicles could be a part of the solution for reducing global carbon emissions while building a more resilient economy. While there are a lot of opportunities to introduce hydrogen into our clean energy economy, it's not yet commercialized in Oregon. Some of the biggest challenges we face are cost, lack of technology, and lack of infrastructure. This year, Oregon passed legislation to direct the Oregon Department of Energy to conduct a study on the potential benefits and barriers of renewable energy in Oregon. This is the first step towards building a hydrogen-enriched society that will help us achieve a carbon-neutral future and create jobs in the 21st century clean energy economy, all the while ensuring that the economic, environmental, and health benefits of our clean energy economy reach all Oregonians, especially those who've been disproportionately impacted by climate change and pollution. As Oregon starts developing our renewable hydrogen program, we look to Japanese industries to help us build the infrastructure needed for a hydrogen economy. As we know, climate change knows no borders. We must act collectively to address this crisis immediately, working together with our global partners, particularly those in Japan, to create a better, cleaner future. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Governor Brown, for sharing the ambitious goal of 100% clean electricity by 2040. Thank you also for placing your expectations on Japanese industries to help build the infrastructure for the hydrogen economy in Oregon. The final guest is Mr. Bruce Ralston, Minister of Energy, Mines, and Low Carbon Innovation, Province of British Columbia.
Hello, my name is Bruce Ralston. I am British Columbia's Minister of Energy, Mines, and Low Carbon Innovation. Let me begin by acknowledging that here in Vancouver, I speak to you from the territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this two-part online event. We will be discussing how North America's Pacific Western provinces and states are approaching hydrogen in our clean energy policies, and learning how Japanese industry is working to build the transportation and power infrastructure for a hydrogen economy. I'm grateful to the New Energy and Industrial Technology Development Organization of Japan and the Japan External Trade Organization for bringing us together. Thank you. And thank you also to the esteemed leaders from California, Oregon, and Washington states. It is a great pleasure to work on these important matters with you. It's a very good time to discuss a hydrogen corridor and clean tech cooperation between our jurisdictions. Our province's Clean BC pathway to a clean energy future is not just for British Columbia, but for the entire planet. The government of British Columbia has worked hard for years on real policy and real action to reach our legislative GHG reduction targets and net zero by 2050. British Columbia is also already recognized as a global leader in hydrogen and fuel cell research and development. For example, over 50% of Canada's hydrogen and fuel cell companies are here in British Columbia, and our province accounts for about 60% of research investment in hydrogen and fuel cell development. There are approximately 35 hydrogen projects currently proposed or under construction in the province, and the number is growing. At present, these projects represent over $3 billion in proposed investment in British Columbia. Many are relatively small or medium-sized projects to provide local hydrogen supply or solutions, but some are major world-scale projects with potential international scope. So it's safe to say we are serious about hydrogen being a big part of our Clean BC future, and we're backing our innovative approach with dollars. For example, this year, the government of British Columbia, the government of Canada, and Shell Canada each committed $35 million to a new Center for Innovation and Clean Energy, collaborating to decarbonize the economy and scale up clean energy, including low carbon intensity hydrogen. As the Minister of Energy, Mines and Low Carbon Innovation, my duty is to advance economic opportunities for all British Columbians that reduce emissions and promote our shared climate goals. As we face the challenge of providing reliable energy solutions while transitioning away from fossil fuels, hydrogen will be a crucial pathway for the decarbonization of essential and often high emission sectors where direct electrification is not possible. This past July, the province released our first hydrogen strategy that will guide the development of British Columbia's hydrogen economy. The strategy clarifies how we will support and promote the development of hydrogen in British Columbia, with 5 key objectives and more than 60 supporting policy actions over the next 10 years that will see us unlock hydrogen's potential and become a world-leading hydrogen economy by 2050. We will promote innovation and investment in hydrogen to meet British Columbia's greenhouse gas reduction targets, create hydrogen-related economic development opportunities throughout the province, improve air quality and reduce noise pollution in urban and remote communities, and make clean energy solutions more convenient, available, and affordable. And finally, work towards fulfilling British Columbia's commitment under the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act. Let me conclude by saying we are fully committed and on the road to net zero by 2050. Our goals are made possible by the abundance of clean hydroelectric power here in British Columbia, coupled with our existing energy infrastructure and world-leading emission reduction policies, and will be realized by ensuring all British Columbians stand to benefit from the development of a hydrogen economy. As we look forward with optimism to our post-pandemic economic recovery, we must seize the opportunities provided by innovation. Our government is investing in our province's prosperous, low-carbon future today and cooperating with like-minded people such as yourselves will be key. None of us can do this alone. Together we can realize local and global benefits to our economies and to our environment. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to our further discussions.
Thank you so much, Minister Ralston, for the greeting. We learned that British Columbia is leading the deployment of hydrogen energy in Canada based on strategies and tangible actions to decarbonize the economy. Again, we appreciate the valuable insight in the greetings and the leadership these 5 have provided on climate action and creating a clean energy future on both sides of the Pacific. Everybody, please give these special guests a big round of applause. Now, I would like to move on to the next part of our program with our keynote speakers. We have invited 3 distinguished speakers, Dr. Jimmy Chen, Ms. Elizabeth Urbanas, and Mr. Tadashi Mogi. We will start with Dr. Jimmy Chen, Managing Director of Stanford Energy Corporate Affiliates, Stanford University Precourt Institute of Energy. Dr. Chen, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and to our attendees in Japan, good morning. My name is Jimmy Chen, and I am a Managing Director at Stanford's Precourt Institute for Energy in Stanford Energy. I would like to thank the organizers, NEDO and JETRO, for this amazing conference. As an introduction to Stanford Energy is a collection of faculty, students, and researchers working on and interested in energy. We have hundreds of faculty members, hundreds of staff members, and thousands of students and researchers. Stanford Energy is organized in these domain-specific initiatives like Storage X for energy storage or hydrogen. And we have these cross-cutting themes which feed the Stanford Energy in policy, machine data, and technology translation to get these leading edge developments into the marketplace. I would also, for those of you who are not aware, Stanford is taking on the climate challenge head on by creating a new school of sustainability. This school is scheduled to go into operation next year. It's not only going to be educating the next generation of climate leaders, but also focused on getting this leading cutting edge technology into the marketplace. So as part of the new school, we will actually be working very closely with our external partners, as well as creating a sustainability accelerator. So let's move on to hydrogen. So hydrogen has many attractive features. It's an existing commodity gas with 70 to 80 million tons per year produced and consumed around the world. It's also closely integrated into the energy systems for both our grid and our natural gas infrastructures. Its applications cut across sectors, from existing applications in refining oil and gas to chemicals for ammonia to make fertilizers. Finally, if you are actually able to generate this hydrogen in volume with low carbon processes, hydrogen can play an enormous role in decarbonizing our climate. Okay, so if we take a look at hydrogen right now, as I mentioned earlier, there's about 70 million tons produced per year, most of it from natural gas. The electricity, electrolysis of hydrogen right now is only a small part, but this is part of the opportunity. If you were able to ramp up electrolysis of water to make clean hydrogen and use clean electricity to do that, and you're able to capture the CO2 from natural gas processes, you can make a big impact on making green hydrogen, which is used to make refining of oil and gas, as well as our fertilizers. Also, the application for transportation right now is very small, but can grow dramatically. And if it's fed all by green hydrogen, it can make an enormous impact. Okay, let's move on to the opportunities in our Pacific states, California, Oregon, and Washington. As you can see, the population of California at almost 40 million is the most populous state in the country. California also has the most land vehicles in the country. Finally, California has 3 of the biggest ports in the country: the Port of LA, the Port of Long Beach, and the Oakland Port. So I would like now to talk about 3 hydrogen opportunities: transportation, power, and the ports. As I mentioned, California has the most land vehicles of any state in the country. It also has some of the most aggressive policies for decarbonizing transportation. For light duty vehicles, the goal is to have 5 million zero-emission vehicles by 2030. There are similar policies in place for buses. After 2030, you can no longer buy a diesel bus. It also has similar legislation for trucks. This will dramatically shape the landscape of transportation in California and have an enormous impact, as transportation is the largest greenhouse gas emitter in California. Moving on to power. So California has some of the most aggressive policies for decarbonizing electricity. By 2030, 60% of our electricity has to be renewable. And by 2045, 100% has to be zero carbon electricity. This presents unique challenges and opportunities, as most of the renewable generation is intermittent. This kind of a unique challenge and opportunity can be seen on the left here in the famous duck curve, where in California, as the amount of solar generation increased year over year, the amount of energy that's driven, the amount of energy that's required drawing from the grid continues to decrease, almost to the point where you're going to start over-generating electricity more than you actually need. At the same time, you're creating an enormous ramp up in power when the sun sets. Both of these challenges are going to continue to increase as the amount of renewable generation increases. This presents a unique opportunity for hydrogen. This excess hydrogen, this excess electricity that is now generated can actually be used to make hydrogen, which can then store that energy away. This is even more attractive when you realize on the right-hand side that the grids in the West are actually all interconnected and governed by a single body, the WECC. This is exactly the thinking when you looked at Utah's Intermountain project, which has a goal of generating hydrogen with renewable electricity, and then storing it in its cell caverns, and then supplying on-demand dispatchable energy to the region as well as to California to meet its aggressive decarbonized electricity goals. Now let's turn our attention to the other opportunity, which is in the ports. As I mentioned, California has 3 of the biggest ports in the country. The Clean Air Action Plan, which is in place, looks at decarbonizing these port operations to comply with California's greenhouse gas emission goals. And hydrogen has a unique opportunity there in its heavy duty equipment and trucks. Okay, so let's look at some of the forecasting. So if we were to look at forecasting, right now the Hydrogen Energy Fuel Cell and Hydrogen Energy Association did a forecast where they looked at the hydrogen demand. So in 2015, there were 10 megatons of hydrogen produced and consumed every year in this country. They did a scenario analysis for a base and an ambitious or aggressive case. And under these cases, hydrogen is forecasted to increase, as seen here, by 2030, driven primarily by existing applications. And by 2050, the demand is predicted and modeled increase dramatically, driven primarily by new applications in transportation, commercial, residential, and industry. If we now look at the forecasting for jobs and revenue, they're forecasting by 2030 for the ambitious scenario, 140 billion in revenue and 700,000 new jobs created by hydrogen economies. By 2050, they're predicting 750 billion in revenue and 3.4 million jobs. Okay, I'd like to now draw attention to what we're doing here at Stanford. So here at Stanford, 2 years ago, we started building a hydrogen community driven and sponsored by 3 Stanford Energy programs, the SECA program, the Natural Gas Initiative program, and SunCat. And we nurtured and built this community, both internal and externally, by creating workshops, educational opportunities, and supporting seed fund research. The interest and response has been overwhelming. Currently, we're fortunate to have over 30 faculty members throughout the university working in the hydrogen space. Everything from production, storage and distribution to utilization. So our community is interested in the complete value chain of hydrogen. As an example of this research, I now would like to discuss the collaboration between Stanford and AC Transit. For those of you who don't know, AC Transit is one of the largest bus-only munis in California. And in order to comply with the policy of zero emission buses, all buses from 2030 on be zero emission, AC Transit was evaluating these various kinds of buses. It's worth noting as a backstory that by 2024, 25% of new buses have to be zero emission, which is just around the corner, 2 years away. So these munis throughout California right now are actively looking at what are the options for zero emission buses? How do they compare? What are the trade-offs? What's the infrastructure cost, operation, maturity? All these types of questions that they're wrestling with in real time to be able to comply with these mandates. So Stanford collaborated with AC Transit to look at 5 different kinds of buses: diesel, diesel hybrid, battery electric, and 2 kinds of fuel cell electric buses. And we had 5 buses of each flavor by the 5x5 study. These buses were driven by the same drivers over the same routes, so we could easily facilitate an apples-to-apples comparison. As you can see there, this allowed us to compare these buses along operational, financial, and environmental metrics. If you're interested in more information about this study, the report is on the Stanford Energy website or the AC Transit website. Finally, as I mentioned, the interest to participate in Stanford's hydrogen community has been overwhelming from around the world. So much so that next year we're going to create a dedicated hydrogen program, the Hydrogen Initiative, that we plan to launch in May of next year. As I mentioned, we're interested in the complete hydrogen value chain, and we already have 5 companies that have signed up to be founding members of this new initiative, and we have 2 more on deck. So thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to a fantastic opportunity in the years ahead with hydrogen. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chen. You have laid down the potential of hydrogen as a clean energy source in the Pacific West. You also introduced us the initiatives of Stanford University. Our next speaker is Ms. Elizabeth Urbanas, Deputy Assistant Secretary for Asia and the Americas, U.S. Department of Energy. Ms. Urbanas, the floor is yours.
Hi, thank you very much. I'm so excited to be here, and I really want to thank everyone in NEDO and JETRO, folks I've worked with for many years in this position, for organizing this conference. And I want to thank all the participants in the Pacific West, both from the United States and Canada, for joining in this very important conversation. And last but not least, I want to thank all of our Japanese counterparts who got up very early this morning to participate in this. It's an important topic, and it's one that I will tell you, just this week I have spoken to the Japanese government about several times, and that is the development of hydrogen and the hydrogen economy, and the ways that Japan and the United States can work together. And while the focus of this conference is on the Pacific West, I'm going to be here to talk to you a little bit about what the federal government in the United States is doing, and in particular what the Department of Energy is doing, and their contribution to the development of hydrogen as a new and hopefully primary source of energy in the future. So I'm just going to pull my slides up here, and I'll walk you through my presentation. Let's see, share screen. Okay. First, I just want to note that the United States government has set out ambitious goals for putting our country on track towards cutting carbon emissions in half by the end of the decade, reaching 100% clean energy electricity by 2035 and achieving net zero emissions by 2050. There are several ways we are going to get this done. First, we can make great progress by developing the proven clean energy technologies we have, such as wind, solar, and modern electricity grids. We can also ensure that we have policies and regulations in place that encourage vast clean energy deployment. However, these technologies and policies alone can't get us all the way to our goals. We also have to innovate and build our way to new solutions. And that's the role of the Department of Energy when it comes to energy in particular. And here is where clean hydrogen has a significant role to play. At the US Department of Energy, we have launched our Energy Earthshot initiatives, a series of ambitious goals all aimed at moving next generation clean energy technologies from the lab to the field and on to the market. We announced the first of our Earthshots back in June, our one for 1-in-1 hydrogen shot. That means that we have a goal of achieving $1 for 1 kilogram of hydrogen in 1 decade. That's an 80% reduction from today's costs. And I want to stress that this goal is for clean hydrogen. This means hydrogen produced from low carbon sources such as renewables, CCUS, or nuclear power. Using this as a baseline, DOE will be working with EPA and other stakeholders in the coming weeks and months to develop a clean hydrogen production carbon intensity standard, which will clearly quantify and qualify what constitutes clean hydrogen, and this is important. Hydrogen can only be part of the solution if it is displacing unabated fossil fuels, not being derived from them. If we can achieve this ambitious goal, hydrogen will be cost competitive and will have a significant role to play in our energy economy. We will be able to use hydrogen to decarbonize industrial manufacturing, to refuel hydrogen fuel cell trucks and make alternative low carbon fuel for planes, to produce clean ammonia and other chemicals, to create longer duration storage, and so much more, as we've heard from other speakers already. If we can achieve this ambitious goal, hydrogen will be cost competitive and will have a significant role to play in our energy economy. We will be able to use hydrogen to decarbonize industrial manufacturing, and as clean hydrogen costs come down, the practical uses for it will go up. At $5 per kilogram today, hydrogen can be competitive for use in heavy duty vehicles and forklifts, which we see quite commonly in the US. But if we can bring that cost down to $3 per kilogram, we would have a significant market for sustainable aviation fuels. At $2 per kilogram, ammonia becomes competitive. Then at $1 per kilogram, which is our goal, we will unlock the full market potential for clean hydrogen, including use in steel making, introduction of hydrogen into gas infrastructure, and hydrogen for energy storage. So this is our goal for hydrogen, and believe me, I know it's ambitious. The question in front of us now is, how do we reach it by the end of the decade? The short answer is that there is no silver bullet, and we will have to make significant efficiency gains on multiple fronts to make $1 hydrogen a reality. Oh. Sorry. I'm sorry that my slides aren't being shared. I just got the note on that. Let's see. Entire screen. Okay, it looks like you can see my screen. Let me know if you can see the slides, and I apologize again. Actually, I think I'm just going to continue this way since we're almost done. The short answer is that there's no silver bullet, and we're looking at, if you look just at electrolysis, we're going to have to significantly reduce costs of electricity, capital operations, and management in order to get this done. But we do have a path to get there. Our goal of getting solar electricity costs down to $20 per megawatt hour by 2030 will help get us where we need to be on a clean energy side. We're aiming for massive reductions in capital costs by improving efficiencies in manufacturing and economies of scale, and through innovations in electrolysis technologies. We're not focused only on electrolysis and are also looking at scenarios for hydrogen production using reforming and thermal conversion. Here too, we see viable pathways to get to $1. To do this, we have first started engaging with stakeholders from across all corners of our country, including scientists, thought leaders, industry, and community-based organization. By bringing our best minds together, we are developing the framework for success. Back in September, we held our Hydrogen Shot Summit, which included dozens of speakers and thousands of participants collaborating on narrowing down our options for moving forward. Second, we are increasing funding for our hydrogen research and development programs at the Department of Energy. The bipartisan infrastructure law which was passed last month, authorizes $1 billion towards this effort for innovating our way towards more efficient and cost-effective commercialization and deployment of electrolysis systems. The law provides another $500 million for research and development on building a clean energy domestic supply chain, including optimizing manufacturing technologies and increasing the reuse and recycling of hydrogen technologies. Our regular fiscal year 22 budget request also includes approximately $400 million spread across several different DOE programs. This money will continue to go towards reducing costs while increasing reliability of key technology and infrastructure. We are also investing in developing the workforce codes and standards that will be the backbone of our hydrogen economy. Third, we must deploy demonstration projects to build efficiencies at scale. The bipartisan infrastructure law is a game changer on this front. It provides the substantial funding necessary to build the projects we need to demonstrate the production, processing, delivery, storage, and end use of clean hydrogen. This is anchored by $8 billion to support the development of at least 4 clean hydrogen hubs across the United States. This will include at least 1 hub that produces hydrogen from abated fossil fuels, at least 1 from renewable energy, and at least 1 from nuclear energy. We will also be developing a diverse set of end uses for hydrogen, including hydrogen for power generation, for use in the industrial sector, and for use in residential and commercial heating, and the transportation sector, of course. And we will be acting quickly. The law requires the Department of Energy to solicit proposals for the hydrogen hubs within 100 days of enactment, and to select at least 4 hubs within 1 year of that deadline for proposal submission. The examples on the slides, which we will share with you afterwards, sorry about that, shows the diversity of projects we have employed in the past, but are not correlated with the potential locations for much larger hydrogen hubs under the infrastructure law. The final location of the new projects will be determined through the proposal review process as prescribed by law. Finally, there is a strong emphasis in the United States on ensuring that hydrogen economy works for everyone in all corners of society. This means that we must show the benefits of hydrogen to both urban communities and rural communities, with opportunities for minorities, for all genders, and people at all income levels. Hydrogen offers an excellent opportunity to help lift communities in need, whether by creating opportunities for skills-matched work within the fossil energy communities, or cleaning up the air in lower income communities located next to industrial facilities. I'm excited by the great potential that hydrogen has in our clean energy future, and I look forward to working with Japan and our other international and domestic partners in achieving our ambitious goals. Thanks for having me here today, and we'll make sure that the slides get circulated afterwards.
Thank you very much, Ms. Urbanas. Actually, this was an excellent opportunity for the Japanese audience in particular to understand the federal government's policies and measures regarding hydrogen. We are looking forward to the slides afterwards. The final keynote speaker is Mr. Tadashi Mogi, who will be speaking on Japanese policies on hydrogen toward carbon neutrality. Mr. Mogi is the Director General, Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy Department, Agency for Natural Resources and Energy, Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry. Mr. Mogi, you have the floor.
Thank you very much for your introduction. I am Tadashi Mogi, Director General of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy Department in Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry. So it's a great pleasure to have an opportunity to speak Japan's hydrogen policy at this forum together with the distinguished participants. So I extend my utmost respect to all who put in the effort for organizing this successful event. So last month at the COP26, Japan reaffirmed its goal to achieve net zero by 2050 under its newly adopted long-term strategy. Japan aims to reduce its greenhouse gas emission by 46% by 2030 from those of 2013 levels, and will continue efforts in its challenge to meet the lofty goal of cutting its emission by 50%. In order to reach this goal, Japan has revised its strategic energy plan, The role of hydrogen in the new strategic energy plan is entirely different from that in the last plan. Hydrogen will be one of the essential energy sources and significant technologies to achieve decarbonization in the power and the non-power sector by 2050. Moreover, the new energy strategic plan clearly stated that hydrogen, including ammonia, would account for 1% of total power generation sources in 2030. 2030 is not so far away, and these developments should keep their pace to accelerate the implementation of hydrogen utilization. Government has been and will be committed to formulating and implementing policies as quickly as possible. In order to accelerate the implementation of hydrogen utilization toward 2030, I'd like to stress the following 3 points. First, the demand side and the supply side to take action in concert. When it comes to R&D or demonstration project, demand side project and supply side project sometimes have been conducted independently. However, in the implementation phase, it is necessary to carry out comprehensive demonstration from hydrogen production to hydrogen transportation and hydrogen utilization based on practical use cases. By doing so, we could find out effectively where challenges are and how we overcome them. And second, Japan should create a world-class role model of hydrogen utilization, hydrogen technologies, and the related industries. Although Japan accounts for 3% of world's energy consumption, creating the advanced role model will contribute to decarbonization, not only in Japan, but in the world as well. Next week, Japan and US will launch the Clean Energy and Green Growth Initiatives. In this initiative, we would like to discuss how we deploy hydrogen collaboratively with sharing the knowledge and the experiences from several hydrogen projects in both sides. And third, the Green Innovation Fund, known as the GI Fund in Japan, is to be fully utilized in order to create technologies and models that benefit the world. GI Fund was established by the Japanese government this year. It has totally 2 trillion yen. And it provides long-term support for R&D and implementation projects planned by companies which are committed to carbon neutrality by developing cutting-edge and competitive technologies. Several hydrogen projects have already started with funding of GI Fund. In order to accelerate hydrogen projects, we are going to utilize 700 billion yen in total into the field of hydrogen from GI Fund. Then, with regard to concrete efforts in progress, I would like to introduce the following 5 strategic fields. Number 1 is water electrolysis technologies and equipment. Number 2 is international hydrogen supply chains. And number 3, power generation. Number 4, mobility. Number 5, industrial utilization of hydrogen as heat sources and raw materials. To start with, as you all realize as well, water electrolysis is a key technology and a key equipment in order to maximize the introduction of renewable energy, such as solar and wind power. And its market will be expanding rapidly worldwide. In order to gain growing market, we will utilize GI Fund, as I mentioned earlier, to facilitate the demonstration project. These projects aims at cost reduction by scaling up the equipment and the development of component technologies such as membrane and so forth, and optimization of the operation system combined with demand side equipment such as boilers or generators. Water electrolysis can store through hydrogen production excess electricity generated by renewables, and enables decarbonization in the non-power sector. So therefore, this technology is essential for decarbonization, especially in Hokkaido, northern part of the Japan, and Kyushu, and the southern part of the Japan, and other potential areas. So now we are planning to support the introduction of water electrolysis combined with the batteries and the submerged direct current cables. With regard to international hydrogen supply chain, it is under consideration to establish a commercial hydrogen supply chain using hydrogen carriers for liquefied hydrogens and MCH. Technological development and extensive demonstration for building large onshore tanks and carriers are planned, aiming to achieve a cost target at 30 yen per 1 cubic meter by 2030. Next, with regard to the area of mobility, a lofty goal of building 1,000 hydrogen stations by 2030 was included in the growth strategy approved by the cabinet in this June. We aim to introduce not only hydrogen fuel passenger cars, but commercial vehicles as well. Now we promote the strategic location of hydrogen stations and technological development toward cost reduction and regulatory reform in integrated manner. In addition to automobiles, technological development for hydrogen power ships and aircraft will be promoted using the GI fund. Lastly, in the industrial sector, we will continue effort, for example, hydrogen reduction steel making using hydrogen instead of coal, and artificial photosynthesis technology, whereby hydrogen is separated from water by sunlight using photocatalyst. And then the hydrogen is combined with the CO2 to produce plastic materials and so on. Hydrogen-based society will never be realized without tremendous efforts. In order to accelerate a hydrogen-based society toward 2030, we will consider revising the basic strategy for hydrogen. In recent years, the momentum toward hydrogen-based societies is increasing. For example, this year, we had a record number of ministers participating in the hydrogen energy ministerial meeting since 2018. We are committed to continuing our efforts and leading the global movement towards the realization of hydrogen society. From this standpoint, I have an important announcement today. So Japanese government has been supporting development of the most advanced fuel cell truck and decarbonizing port equipment at the Port of Los Angeles. Today, NEDO has just selected the new project in Port of Los Angeles, where vehicles, handlers, tractors, and rubber-tired gantry cranes fueled by hydrogen generated from biogas are installed as practice as use cases. Furthermore, in the context of Green Corridor, which was announced at the recent Quad meeting in September, several ports in Japan will align with the Port of Los Angeles in using hydrogen in their operations. Also, we can see the local government cooperation between Japan and the US. Namie Town in Fukushima, Japan, and the city of Lancaster, California, which announces its goal to be the first hydrogen-based city in the United States, have signed a hydrogen sister city agreement on October 1st. I truly expect that such activity will lead the world toward a hydrogen-based society. Concluding my speech, I sincerely hope that this forum will create a new cooperative relationship leading to the promising future towards the implementation to society of hydrogen. So thank you for having me today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mogi, 4-year introduction of Japan's hydrogen strategy, I believe we all have a good sense of the importance that the Japanese government places on hydrogen as a clean energy resource. Again, thank you, Dr. Jimmy Chen, Ms. Elizabeth Urbanas, and Mr. Tadashi Mogi for the wonderful presentations today. Now, I would like to move on to our first panel discussion with state and provincial representatives. They will present clean energy policies and the challenges and opportunities in expanding hydrogen as a resource in their regions. The panel will include a 30-minute discussion and time for audience questions. Before we get started, I would like to explain how to participate in this session. Anyone may submit questions to today's presenters through the question window in the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation. We will collect and address as many of them as possible during the Q&A session. 日本の皆様へのお願いです。質問はパネリストの方々も理解できるよう英語でお寄せください。画面下の Q&A 機能をお使いください。We have invited 4 panelists, Dr. Andrew McAllister, Commissioner at California Energy Commission, Mr. Brian Young, Director of Economic Development, Clean Technologies Sector at Washington State Department of Commerce, Dr. Jerry Sinclair, DC Innovation Commissioner at Government of British Columbia, and Ms. Rebecca Smith, Senior Energy Policy Analyst, Oregon Department of Energy. The panel moderator is Dr. Aaron Fever, Director, Joint Center for Development and Research in Earth Abundant Materials at Washington State University. So without further ado, I'd like to turn the microphone over to Dr. Fever.
Thank you, Tak. Hello, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here, and I first wanted to thank the JETRO and NEDO teams for organizing this conference. I think it's going to be a really great session, and I look forward to all the collaboration that's potentially going to come out of this. So I wanted to start briefly with explaining a little bit more about JC Dream and Charge, which are a couple of organizations that we're running here in Washington State, and then we'll get on with the rest of the panel. So I'm going to share my screen here. Hopefully that goes well. And my goal here is to briefly share with you the clean energy vision of JC Dream and how that has led to our new organization called Charge. Hopefully it will go to presentation mode. There we go. So JC Dream is the Joint Center for Deployment and Research in Earth Abundant Materials, and we focus on the nexus of clean energy, transportation, and critical materials challenges. We're a Washington State-run organization, and so we naturally put a focus on the energy sector in Washington State. Just like much of the rest of the world, Washington State has power that comes from electricity in the power grid, liquid fuels, things like gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel, and gaseous fuels, which up until now have primarily been natural gas. And this fuels pretty much everything we have going on. We are fueling our transportation sector primarily through those liquid fuels. We're fueling a lot of industry and built environment with natural gas. And of course, in Washington State, we have a phenomenal power grid, which is actually already about 95% carbon free. We're blessed in this state with a large number of hydroelectric assets, as well as abundant wind and solar installations. Now that's great, and we are aggressively moving forward to try to decarbonize our transportation sector and the built environment with this clean power grid as quickly as we possibly can. But we're still heavily dependent on fossil fuels, and currently those emissions are being emitted as CO2, which is a problem we aim to solve with some new technology related to hydrogen and e-fuels. So what we're trying to do here is create closed carbon loops. And what we're aiming to do is capture carbon dioxide either through direct air capture or through biosources. Plants are excellent at capturing carbon, pull that back out of the atmosphere and use it to produce electrofuels with green hydrogen that we can produce from our clean and abundant power grid. Now that hydrogen can be used directly as a transportation fuel. It can be used directly as a heating fuel or for industrial applications, but it also can be formed into electrofuels by combining it with the carbon from our atmosphere. And in this way, what we aim to do is completely close that carbon loop and move forward with a completely clean energy economy. Now, I think we all know this will take many decades, but it's extremely important. It's particularly important to Washington State because much of our industry is heavily dependent on heavy-duty transportation sectors. We have a huge aviation sector. We have a huge maritime and port sector. We have shipping and logistics and heavy-duty trucking and medium-duty trucking applications. All major companies here in Washington State are very focused on decarbonizing those sectors. So we're really aiming to do this as aggressively as possible. Now, I wanted to briefly introduce to you all the challenge of critical materials associated with this entire clean energy vision. I've brought up the periodic table of the elements over there on the right and highlighted some of the energy critical materials that we're dealing with. Now, this is the core issue of JC Dream. I'm sure especially many of those in Japanese industry have been can relate very closely to the rare earths crisis of 2010 or 2012, when China virtually cut off rare earth access to much of Japan. This caused enormous disruption to the electronics industry. And now when we look at rare earths, we are concerned about things like electric motors for wind turbines or electric vehicles. Even more so now, we're looking at batteries like lithium-ion batteries, which contain cobalt and lithium. And that's a major hurdle that we need to overcome because a dominant source of cobalt is from the Democratic Republic of the Congo in Africa, which is then run through a Chinese supply chain and results in a supply chain that we really don't want to be involved in. In the hydrogen economy, there are a number of platinum group metals and other catalysts that are extremely important for production of electrolyzers, fuel cells, and the kinds of chemical reactors that we can rely on for e-fuels. So our goal here, especially in that new hydrogen economy as it's unfolding in front of us, is to really make sure that we address those supply chain challenges now so that we aren't running into the same problems that we're seeing in the battery supply chain and sector of rare earths. And that is the reason that we've created Charge, which is going to focus on hydrogen and e-fuels in that specific sector. So with that, I would like to, I will stop sharing my screen here and we will move on with our panel discussion. So first, I would like to introduce Commissioner Andrew McAllister. Andrew is serving his second term on the California Energy Commission. At the Energy Commission, he leads the policy area of energy efficiency, including the building energy efficiency standards, appliance efficiency, and load management and flexibility. More broadly, he is focused on enabling modern, data-rich analytical tools to support strong clean energy policy development and program implementation. Andrew, take it away.
Great, well, thank you, Dr. Fever, appreciate that. I'm really happy to be here. Was able to see much of the session up to now, and it's just so clear that there's a lot of possibility and investment and innovation and just a huge potential for hydrogen to grow in its relevance to our decarbonization journeys that we're all undertaking in parallel and together. So that's extremely heartening. And I want to just point out, I guess, that really what we're talking about is not just energy policy. It's actually industrial policy. It really is the big infrastructures that our society invests in, and that does take government. Necessarily, it takes government leadership as well as large quantities of private investment. And I think hydrogen is certainly fits within that overall characterization of a shift in industrial policy. And that term is a little bit outdated, but I think it's coming into a new awakening, actually, as we really have to respond to the urgency of climate change in a way that really does take muscular collaborations from all sectors of society. And so just as by way of, a big idea to start with, let's see, I don't have to share slides. I could do that, but I guess I kind of prefer to just talk it through, because I think we have limited time and we have a number of speakers and want to get to the Q&A. But there, as Dr. Chen went over much of what's happening in California at a high level, and I wanted to just put some finer points on that. First, we do have an evolving state policy apparatus that's engaging with hydrogen, and I'll just bring up a few aspects of that. The transportation executive order that has been presented already, but light and medium duty, 100% carbon free by 2035, and or light duty by 2035, and then medium and heavy by 2045. That is a huge market mover, as California is the 5th largest economy, has tens of millions of vehicles that will be affected by this. So that is a big deal, and it's not only going to affect all the energy systems, but obviously is going to affect the electric system very heavily, but also opens up a lot of possibility for hydrogen and transportation. And the second thing we're doing is investing quite a bit in that sector. We have begun funding. We've got about 50 hydrogen fueling stations around the state. The target in the near term is to get to 200. And working with the OEMs, the car manufacturers, the auto manufacturers, to improve the offerings of the actual vehicles. And so I think that's an obvious place to start building the hydrogen economy. We're also investing in projects, marina, ports, both on land and maritime applications, as well as aviation. And so we're funding some projects, demonstration projects, and beyond that, and also funding quite a bit of research in those areas of hydrogen. And then I will just mention the LA high deal as well. So that's, I think, a very exciting development. It's not only relevant for California, but really across the West, and others will have and will detail that quite a bit. But I think the upshot of high deal is that its demonstrative impact in the marketplace in the Western US, I think is very, very important. A lot is riding on that, and it's multi-sectoral. Intermountain obviously is part of the overall Los Angeles plan, and also Los Angeles itself has a large existing ecosystem of off-takers of hydrogen that's multi-sectoral. So it's not just transportation, but it's also industry, it's also power sector, and it's also got a fair amount of existing pipeline infrastructure, oil and gas infrastructure that the idea is to take advantage of that and optimize the transition in a way that is that moves the marketplace, gets costs down, and starts to open new possibilities. And I think that's a very exciting development, and kudos to all the partners in LA that are making that happen. So I do think there are some. Well, before I move on to the questions and challenges, so the Energy Commission is funding quite a bit of work in the hydrogen realm. The Public Utilities Commission, our sister agency, is also doing a fair amount. They have several efforts to create hydrogen viability in the hydrogen sphere, looking at hydrogen injection standards for the gas grid, and via the renewable gas interconnection tariff, and looking at ways to promote and even require hydrogen procurement in the IRP, the integrated resource planning that the PUC requires of the utilities that they regulate, which cover most of the state. And so they have a big set of levers to pull that can move the market as well. Of course, we do need to account for the need for tracking. It's really, the accounting really matters here. we need to use hydrogen as a vehicle to decarbonize, obviously. And so we have to know where those molecules are coming from and really make the system accountable for making green hydrogen and showing that it is green hydrogen. And also in the combustion applications, we need to make sure that we're not exacerbating our NOx problem, right? We have a lot of the state is out of attainment for ground level ozone, and NOx is a precursor of that. And we really don't have a lot of places to go to reduce NOx, and we certainly don't want to increase it. So, so the air quality issue, definitely in LA is front and center is something that needs to be taken care of. And then finally, wanted to talk about some long-term modeling we're doing in the power sector and sort of just bring up a little bit of where hydrogen stands in the conversation in California in terms of power sector. We have a 100% carbon-free goal in the power sector by 2045. Maybe will happen sooner than that, as things are happening very quickly. And our modeling indicates that it is very doable up to about 90% with current technology. And after that, we really need some new solutions for where we are going to get the clean, firm power that we need. And in some sense, dispatchable power, and Dr. Chen talked a little bit about the Dept curve. I won't get into that, but we certainly need dispatchable 100% carbon-free power. And so there are a number of possibilities there, but that is where hydrogen and power sector may well play. Again, we need to focus on developing technology, getting the cost down, making sure that that's viable in the power sector. But I think the questions we have in California, we know industry, we know the transportation sector, somewhat there's policy, the policy community is wrestling a little bit with where hydrogen is most relevant in the power sector. And then also with buildings in terms of blending and end uses. We have to wrestle with this idea of where we put our investments in the near term to avoid lock-in with non-zero carbon technologies in the long term. That's a very important criterion that almost requires a little bit of a crystal ball to see where we're going to be in 10 or 15 years to avoid those stranded assets. And so, if we're going to be kind of stuck down the road with only a 50% blend that's required now for, that's now powering a bunch of end uses out there in the retail gas grid, that makes life difficult down the road to really pivot then to 100% green if the end uses aren't appropriate for pure hydrogen. And so there are complementary gas molecules, renewable gas and different sources of non-carbon gas. But again, hydrogen, it has to be part of this bigger conversation, and there are a lot of pieces to this puzzle. So I think I'll stop there. I think, hopefully I've given a flavor of I think most of you know about the hydrogen, the potential technologies for hydrogen. And I think that the policy kind of regime, it does have a lot of reliability of the electric sector, equity. We have to really balance a lot of different factors. And so the cost and the sort of viability and where hydrogen can fit into the overall needs of our state during our decarbonization journey, as we move closer and closer to 100% carbon free, I think is something we're approaching, I think, with an open mind and a lot of interesting discussion, a lot of interesting sort of fact gathering and technology development. And I think that's sort of the moment that we are in California. And lastly, I'll just wrap by saying we are looking, we're collaborating up and down the coast, absolutely, and with other countries, Netherlands, Germany, Japan, obviously, which really thankful to be here with JETRO and NEDO, and looking at those models and the conclusions of the kinds of investigations that are happening across the globe. And I think it's not just in California and across the West, it's also a global phenomenon. And I think we're all going to learn from each other what the solutions are. And those aren't, the molecules, same molecules, whether they're across the Pacific or here in California. And I think the applications will be largely common as well. So really looking forward to that collaboration and sharing and note-taking as we all do interesting things that can teach, that we all can learn from. So thanks again for the opportunity. Really looking forward to the discussion, and back to you, Dr. Fever.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. McAllister. Lots of interesting stuff going on in California, as I think we all know. Much appreciated. Next, I'd like to introduce Brian Young. Brian brings diverse strategic and operational experience to his role as Governor Inslee's Clean Technology Sector Lead. He's the point of contact for clean technology companies who want to navigate Washington State's political and economic landscape. He is focused on developing a prosperous and varied clean tech sector based on our state's existing strengths. Brian, take it away.
All right, thank you very much. I'd just like to start by saying thank you to Dr. McAllister, and I thought his summary of a lot of the challenges that we're going to see as we make these transitions are very spot on. Same thing we're dealing with in Washington. So I'm not going to try to reiterate that because he said it very well. And with that, I would also like to very much thank JETRO and NEDO, our sponsors today. They've put a lot of work into this, and we're just honored to be part of this. So yes, I'm with the state of Washington. I look at, my job is to look at a lot of this transition to a clean economy through the economic development lens. So I think not only about how we can produce hydrogen for end uses, but what are the opportunities in those supply chains to produce the pieces of the new coming hydrogen economy? Where are the opportunities for Washington companies to take advantage of the infrastructure needs that are going to be built out? So a lot of my angle comes from the economic development train of thought. And I've also been lucky to be preceded here by both Governor Inslee and Dr. Fever, who've already shared a lot of the exciting things and kind of the reasons that Washington State is excited about the hydrogen future and our role in it. I would first point folks to our state energy strategy, which can be found at the Department of Commerce's website from our energy division. But we have it just came out in beginning of 2021 this year, and really lays out the first steps we're taking over at least the next 5 years to address and start addressing these climate change goals that we have put into place. So Washington State, as Governor Inslee mentioned, has been a very aggressive, especially in the last 4 years, around laws focused on our role in climate change and how we're going to meet our Paris Accord promises. So 100% clean electricity, and that's by 2030, 2045, that has to be no fossil electrons on our grid in use. We now have a clean fuel standard, luckily catching up with our other neighbors up and down the West Coast to look at our transportation fuels and lower that carbon. We have very strict clean building laws that are going into effect that are effectively going to drive down our built environment into a net zero, close to net zero by 2040. 2045 timeframe. And then we have our new Climate Commitment Act, which, as Governor Inslee mentioned, is a cap and invest on carbon. All of these are going to drive, obviously, projects in the state to reduce our carbon. It's also going to drive innovation. As Dr. McAllister also mentioned, we're excited about the potential to innovate some of these new technologies, especially around hydrogen and how hydrogen fits into that final piece of a truly clean or carbon-free economy. And part of that, we talked about Washington State is a very green grid just by luck. We produce 25% of the hydroelectric power of the entire United States in Washington State. With that comes a lot of energy export to other states, a large transmission grid, and a lot of the reasons why people often look to the Northwest for hydrogen production, in particular, stable, low cost, low carbon electricity. But also, this leaves us with about 20% of decarbonization, which is a good place to be. We don't have to do, a lot of the United States is the opposite. They've got about 20 to 30% penetration of renewables, and they have an 80% problem to fix. We have the flip of that. We've got about 80%, we have 20 to fix. But as they say, the last 20%, the last 10%, whatever, is often the hardest. And so we're excited, Washington State's role especially when it comes to hydrogen, is how do these kind of next generation or these advanced thoughts of where hydrogen can fit into a clean economy in our heavy transportation areas, in our industrial processes, possibly in our clean building and the clean building work we're doing. Where does hydrogen work? How can we be a demonstration place for these newer technologies to squeeze out that last bit of carbon in our power systems? I will real quickly also just mention, we have, and I mentioned our state energy strategy. I think you'll notice it mentions hydrogen very often, and it makes clear that we have some work to do, and we intend to do that work over the coming year, and continuing to understand specifically how hydrogen works into our state energy goals. So I think you'll see more work coming from the state level, as well as work with our industrial partners and other state partners on where hydrogen best fits. In the meantime, we've got a lot of folks being very progressive in this area, and I'll just mention a few. Douglas County, one of our PUDs in central Washington, has built and is in the process of building, will be the first public utility to own a electrolyzer, so a 5 megawatt electrolyzer, and they have a lot of different opportunities that we can talk about later there. We also have Tacoma Power and the Port of Tacoma, which is very, I think they have the nation's first tariff specific to electrolytic hydrogen production. The Port of Tacoma as well has some very cutting edge hydrogen related projects looking at cold ironing opportunities. And finally, the City of Seattle, Port of Seattle, Seattle City Light, the local municipal utility, along with Pacific Northwest National Labs, was recently awarded DOE funding to understand again how hydrogen can fit into kind of a modern city like Seattle. So there's a lot more opportunity, and we're really glad to be here. I will pass it on to my other panelists and let them introduce themselves, and look forward to the Q&A. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Brian, and absolutely echo your enthusiasm for Washington State working to lead the way on some of those really hard to decarbonize, deep decarbonization goals for heavy duty transportation and other areas. Next, I'd like to introduce Jerry Sinclair. Jerry was first appointed as BC's Innovation Commissioner in July of 2020. She has a breadth of experience in senior leadership positions in the investment capital, digital media, information technology fields. She is also an associate with the Creative Destruction Lab, a nonprofit organization that delivers an objectives-based program to scale up seed stage science and technology-based companies. Welcome, Jerry.
Thank you very much. And I'm delighted to be here. I'm going to share my screen. There we go. Hopefully it works. Ah, come on, baby. There. Good and good. So I think that's working. Is that right, everyone?
Yep, you're good.
Great. Okay. So first of all, let me start off by echoing all of the participants today to thank NEDO and JETRO for their sponsorship of this event. And I must say it is rather a creative and innovative event to bring together not only North America and Japan, but not just Canada, but the entire corridor along the Pacific. And so I'm very, very impressed with the ambitious goals to bring us all together, and to especially to our Japanese participants for being up so early and to listen to the speakers today. So thank you very much. So I want to start off by saying I'm the Innovation Commissioner of the province of British Columbia. I've participated, I think, in every piece of the innovation ecosystem. I started off as a university professor. I spun some technology out of my lab at Simon Fraser University in BC, and grew it into a company that was ultimately acquired by Microsoft. So I raised venture capital. I've been a venture capitalist. I've started accelerators, and I've worked for major industry. So I think I've seen, and I've been in government, and I am in government now. So I think I've seen innovation innovation from all sides now. And I had actually retired after being in the venture capital business for a while, and I thought I was going to have a nice time traveling and writing, but then COVID struck. And so when the BC government asked me, did I want to become the innovation commissioner, I jumped at the chance because I thought I could take my experience and focus on some of the things that concern me most. Number one is how do we apply innovation to the very huge threats of climate change? And secondly, how can we build a very strong and robust innovation economy in our province of British Columbia? So of course, hydrogen is a very key piece of the future of our innovation cluster, our innovation economy in British Columbia. And so I'm gonna talk to you about a little bit about our strategic vision, and then something more around the innovation strategy that we have. And I'll be echoing some of Brian's remarks, because we think that it's very, very important for our companies to actually provide the solutions that are going to power the future. So in terms of the strategic vision of British Columbia, we are going to, our strategic vision is very clear. We're going to leverage our significant strengths to become simply a leading hydrogen economy by 2050. And so what are these strengths? Well, as I said, I'm the innovation commissioner, so I'm going to start with our innovation strength. And we are home to world-leading hydrogen fuel cell cluster companies. Vancouver is now being called ZEV City. We have over 70 different companies right now working in the area of zero emission, both hydrogen and electrification. And so it's really great to work with these companies. Like our neighbors, we have abundant low-cost feedstocks. We have an abundance of clean electricity. We've had a carbon tax in place since 2008, and our future plan includes a $170 per ton tax, carbon tax that is going to be phased in over the next 9 years to 2030. We have a low carbon fuel standard, which sets carbon intensity targets that decline each year. We also have significant carbon capture and sequestration potential. In terms of our Clean BC policy, in 2018, we introduced the Clean BC plan, which set out a pathway to achieving BC's climate targets to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 40% by 2030. And this was based on 2007 levels. And through Clean BC, we have a world-leading and award-winning suite of policies in support of the production and use of low-carbon hydrogen. Indeed, the Clean BC program for industry won the award for the most creative climate solution at COP26 in Glasgow just a few weeks ago. So some of the Clean BC policies focus on zero emission vehicles, like our neighbors. Again, we're very much committed to 100% of all vehicles purchased in British Columbia being electric, or by 2040. We're reducing diesel use in medium and heavy duty vehicles, including our fleets and ships and trains. We have a target of 15% renewable natural gas by 2030, and our low carbon fuel standard, 20% reduction by 2030. And of course, we have an 80% diesel reduction in remote communities by 2030. And you know, I think I'm associated with the Ministry of Jobs, Economic Recovery and Innovation, and so we're very focused on jobs and economic development, like our previous speakers. And you know, as I mentioned, I was a venture capitalist until recently, and it was very difficult in you know, in previous years, almost pre-COVID, to get any investment in clean tech whatsoever. But right now, with the ESG reporting so important and the focus on climate change, there are huge investment opportunities, and there's a great interest now for investment in clean technologies, including hydrogen, to provide short-term economic recovery, including jobs and innovation, and of course, long-term growth. I spoke a bit about the global capital looking for a place to invest, and BC's can expect a positive GDP impact of about 2.5 billion by 2050. And we're also looking at almost 4,000 new jobs in BC, most of which will be highly skilled technicians and scientists and engineers and other professionals. And we see, like the other speakers, significant economic opportunities for rural areas in terms of ports and industrial hubs. And as I mentioned, we have a strong focus on clean tech innovation and commercialization. And I'd like to talk a little bit about my own particular interest and project I'm leading here in the province. It ties very much into what Mr. Mogi said earlier, that we have to focus on both the supply side and the demand side when we're talking about our hydrogen strategy. And I've been looking at innovation and the innovation ecosystem, and I come to the conclusion that we tend to invest too much on the supply side. And from a government perspective, we invest in university research and we invest in accelerators. And from a venture capital perspective, we're investing in building, startups and trying to get them to commercialize and find the product market fit. But not enough, I feel, is being put on the demand side of innovation. What does the market really want? What are the reasons, for instance, that companies are willing and will get to the point where they will actually purchase hydrogen-based solutions? So we're looking at 3 test beds. We call this an integrated network approach. I also refer to it as a buyer's club, where we pull together potential purchasers of clean technology solutions. We're doing one at the Port of Prince Rupert, and we're doing another one at Vancouver Airport, and another one with the city of Surrey, all of which have commitments to electrify their fleets and bring in hydrogen solutions for their transportation and supply chain management. So I've spoken very, very quickly. I hope I've given you a flavor of some of the exciting things we're doing in British Columbia. I look forward to collaborating with all of you today because you folks can help me in terms of you all have potential buyers of hydrogen technology. We want to know what your regions are looking for as well. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jerry. It's really great to hear about all the things going on in BC. So next, I'd like to introduce Rebecca Smith. Rebecca is a senior energy policy analyst at the Oregon Department of Energy, where she focuses on alternative transportation fuels in the medium and heavy-duty vehicle sectors, including electricity and renewable hydrogen. She is the lead author for ODO's study, Renewable Hydrogen for Oregon, as required by state law. Welcome, Rebecca.
Welcome, Dr. Fever. Thank you so much. And thank you to NEDO and JETRO for having me today. So I would love to start out talking about kind of where we are right now with respect to hydrogen and renewable hydrogen in Oregon, because we are in some respects a little bit further behind certainly where California is and in some measures as well as where some of our other sister states like Washington are. Namely, we don't have any installed electrolyzer capacity in Oregon at this time. We also don't have any fueling stations for any hydrogen vehicles, be they light duty, medium duty, or heavy duty. That said, we do have a number of projects that are in the conceptualization stage, and at least 4, actually. I keep hearing about new ones every day. So one of our state's largest transit agency in Portland, TriMet, recently completed a feasibility study on using hydrogen for some of its transit buses. It found that in not all contexts were battery electric transit buses ideal. And they haven't committed yet to moving forward with hydrogen, but if they did, certainly their study looked at considering building their own supply there, citing issues with the cost and volatility of sourcing renewable hydrogen. And with the passage of the recent infrastructure bill, US DOE Elizabeth Urbanas laid out some of the really exciting funding opportunities for hydrogen, and one that's been getting a lot of consideration in the Northwest is that idea of a hydrogen hub. And so we have certainly heard of interest from a number of entities, pardon me, in the Northwest about teaming up and looking at an opportunity for a hub in the Northwest. Now, whether that would be at a port, say in Oregon or Washington, or if it would be somewhere where it might be able to take advantage of natural gas infrastructure, or if it would look at building its own infrastructure, all of those things remain to be seen. But I think it's an object lesson in the fact that when you get some federal funding, there is an immediate interest because there just isn't a lot of funding opportunity right now. Certainly Oregon as a state is not offering any, and so we're really dependent on what's available from the federal government. I know one area of interest for a lot of developers is understanding what the regulatory landscape is in different states. And so here in Oregon, we don't really have a lot of policy on the books right now, specifically about hydrogen or renewable hydrogen. We do have a lot of what I would call enabling policies, in that we are a pretty ripe place for renewable hydrogen. We have a clean electricity standard, clean by 2040. We have a clean fuels program. We our renewable portfolio standard, or RPS, allows for eligibility of renewable hydrogen in there. And we also recently passed a bill that allows our natural gas utilities to source certain amounts of renewable natural gas and to rate base that. And there is eligibility in there for renewable hydrogen as well. And then also we do have a direct access program in Oregon, which I've heard from developers is really attractive when considering setting up a project, because that allows you to, if you're going to set up an electrolyzer, to contract directly with a power producer to get the renewable electricity you'd like to produce that green hydrogen. Our Governor, Kate Brown, also mentioned the study bill that passed this year. And Dr. Fever mentioned I am the lead author on that study. And so this, I think, is probably going to be one of the biggest steps that Oregon will take in determining what its next steps are on renewable hydrogen. This is kind of the preamble, perhaps, to developing a specific strategy. As mentioned, we're going to look at what the opportunities are, not only for production of green hydrogen in Oregon, but also for consumption. And then also look at what the barriers are. And we'll definitely be looking at that for Oregon specifically, but truly it's really kind of impossible and not terribly sensical to look at it in a vacuum of a single state, when really, when we start talking about the hydrogen economy, these small one-off projects aren't really going to make sense. We're starting to really see that a regional approach is really what is likely going to help jumpstart the industry. Just some quick details maybe on the Oregon context as well, some specificity there. I will say that we are not a member of an independent system operator or a regional transmission organization, which means we have a bilateral power market. And so while we are, we have a lot of renewable energy in the state and lots of excitement and a lot of projects in the queue, we still don't always have the same, information transparency about the market that a developer might want. And, that can affect the costs as well. So that's certainly an area to consider. I will leave it there, except to say that if you have any questions about the study, or if particularly you have any suggestions about how, things Oregon should consider when and looking at renewable hydrogen as an opportunity for decarbonization, or policies that we should consider in the future to help support renewable hydrogen, I would love to hear them. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Very interesting, and definitely looking forward to the possibility of working together on a Northwest Hydrogen Hub. I like that idea a lot. So I want to. We've been receiving a lot of questions, a bunch of great questions from the audience, and we've been looking over those and trying to pull together the theme a little bit. I would say, I bet a good third of the questions have kind of come down to, hey, we've got these states and provinces along the West Coast. Why can't we get together and pull off a hydrogen highway along the I-5 corridor that runs from Vancouver, BC to San Diego? You know, I think it's a very fair point. Hydrogen filling stations are a known thing. They're not that complicated. And they're not too terribly expensive. So anyway, that's I think one of the biggest questions. And I think it also stems from a desire to see heavy duty transportation corridors exist, because really when we're talking about these long and medium duty truck, cycles, we're really only need to connect a couple 100 miles, or maybe even 500 mile, increments to get to piece together a hydrogen highway. So anyway, let's start. I'll go ahead and pick on you first, Brian, since you're from our home state. What do you think are the barriers, and what do we need to do to work together to make this happen?
Yeah, there are a lot of barriers, I can imagine. I mean, there is a concept of, I will say from Washington State's perspective, when we think of a hydrogen highway and we look at hydrogen, we usually don't come at it from a personal transportation light vehicle opportunity. I'm not saying it's not there, but at the same time, as I mentioned, we produce a lot of green electrons, and our state energy strategy calls for the production of a lot more to meet our goals. And with that, we're going to use that energy in different ways. If it goes directly into a battery powered vehicle, maybe in the lighter duty frame, or if it goes into a fuel cell vehicle at some point. I don't think we've gotten that far in our thinking. I think what I look at it is what we are going to be doing probably in the next 5 years, especially, is building out the electrical infrastructure, the grid, the smart grid, the grid modifications needed to get electricity to electrify our economy in more quantity and kind of distributed in a smarter way. That, I think, is going to be the underlying. I mean, hydrogen is inherently a carrier. I don't know if this is true. A carrier of electricity, not really, but in our state, it is. Then how is once we have that distribution of green electrons, the green electrons produced and distributed where they need to be, what form are they going to be best used as? And to some extent, I don't think that we as the government have waded into that conversation. I think we have a lot of research to be done. When we think of a hydrogen highway, I think that passenger side of the equation comes to mind very quickly. And it's probably not where the state of Washington's mind is at, but where it's probably more effective and of more interest, especially from our side, is in those hard to electrify sectors, in that heavy duty trucking. I mean, we have a company like PACCAR here in Washington that's very interested in where does that work for heavy duty trucking, obviously port operations, things like this. So I guess when I think of a hydrogen highway, obviously we need hydrogen production, and then how that hydrogen is used is somewhat up in the air. I don't think this idea that we're just going to have
most folks actually are pretty interested in a shipping, a heavy duty transportation shipping corridor is kind of the focus of most.
I guess that would be a long way of, I'll stop talking, but a long way of saying that's where our interest lies the most, is that understanding of that heavy transportation corridors. Where is the hydrogen potential within those?
Yeah, I agree. Super important. I think we might have to lose Jerry Sinclair a little bit earlier than the rest. Jerry, would you care to comment? You know, especially I think there's if we're having a hard time collaborating between states in the United States, what do we need to do to collaborate with Canada and British Columbia to make this happen?
Well, I'd like to let folks know that I've been part, and a lot of folks have been part of trying to put in place a Cascadia innovation corridor between Vancouver, well, between BC and Washington and Oregon. And over the past 3 years, great efforts have gone into trying to create an economic region called Cascadia, that because we share so many of the same resources and the same gifts and the same challenges. And it's been very, very difficult. We just finished a summit a couple of weeks ago, and I have to say that there was much more enthusiasm this time among industry. I think this is the issue we're going to face with the hydrogen highway. Obviously, governments and policymakers and educators see the need. It's the question is when is industry going to actually bite the bullet and get involved? And so this time at the Cascadia Innovation Corridor the conversations were completely different. There were actually many more representatives from industry coming to the table. So I guess the answer is that the and you know, I'm looking at it again from a demand side of the equation. What is it going to take, you know, for our ports and our shipping industries to actually move into using hydrogen? And we're doing a test bed at Rupert. There was talk earlier about by Dr. Chen about very interesting work going on at the port of LA. There's also lots of stuff happening in Seattle and Portland. Why don't we start collaborating in terms of what are the needs and what is it going to take? That's my suggestion.
Very good, thank you. I guess Dr. McAllister, I'd like to go to you next. I think California has the most experience with, you know, installing hydrogen filling stations and that kind of infrastructure. A lot of it has been a little bit more geared towards passenger vehicles, but we're moving into heavy duty transit and trucking as one of the key focus areas for that. And that seems to be what a lot of folks are interested in. Maybe you could share some of your experience with how we succeed at that.
For sure. Appreciate the question, definitely. So we have made a significant investment and we're projecting more investment. I think part of the bringing industry along is that, you know, policy needs to say, hey, we're committed to this path, therefore it's safe to invest, and you're not going to invest in something that's going to go away in the next couple of years. So there's this chicken egg kind of problem with hydrogen where, you know, we need both demand and supply. We need in order to bring the supply, you know, we need the off-takers. So there's that kind of dynamic. But we have invested in fueling stations, and we'll continue to do so. And also looking at building part of that nexus you just described with, you know, drayage vehicles, you know, the port sort of ancillary vehicles, right, on land and in the port itself on the water. And so, you know, tugs and you know, drayage and everything, and that is an off-taker that's real and solid. You know, in California, our main policy in the transportation sector for decarbonizing it has been the low carbon fuel standard. And that's been that's mobilized a lot of investment in various types of clean fuels. And so I think there's potential to you know, target these kinds of end uses as well around the ports and the corridor. You know, the fueling stations do require not only an upfront investment to actually install the thing, but it needs a, you know, constant supply, or at least keep the supply going to the station. It also needs, you know, it needs business. It needs enough vehicles to sort of make it worthwhile. We're in this situation in these early days of subsidizing not only the installation, but also the maintenance and operation of those fueling stations. And so it does represent quite an investment. So I think the conversation between, you know, BC, Washington, Oregon, and California, there is certainly potential for a targeted conversation about the corridor, but I think we'd have to bring a lot more actors to the table. And you know, Jerry, you mentioned, you know, you sort of suggested this, that really this takes a collaboration with industry and all the partners that would bring a project of that magnitude kind of to the fore and really make it a priority. And that kind of public-private partnership, I think, is a potential solution to get that done. But we would all have to prioritize this on the top of all the other many priorities we have. And so I think it's a great idea. And we do have a thing called the Pacific Coast Collaborative, which is all 4 of these states and province that high-level policy makers and administration, governors' offices and energy principals get together and decide on priorities. So that might be a forum to bring this up in.
Yeah, no, I think that'd be a really good starting point. One of the things that I was learning about in California is a capacity credit that's been added to the low carbon fuel standard as a way to kind of put out some incentives to overbuild some of that infrastructure in advance of the business coming, because there's some people say, hey, there needs to be a, if you build it, they will come kind of mentality, where some of that infrastructure has to be in place before anybody wants to start to think about doing a shipping corridor between any few points. You just have to see that basic infrastructure in place.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'm not our agency doesn't actually run the low carbon fuel standard. It's the California Air Resources Board, and I know that they have professionals on staff that really get the ins and outs of how these markets are developing. So definitely worth bringing them into this conversation.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Rebecca, would you care to comment on how we what you think needs to happen in Oregon to connect a West Coast hydrogen shipping corridor together?
Well, I mean, certainly I know that we were just talking about transportation in general. And so there has been a look in Oregon by our Department of Transportation at kind of some scenario building in terms of where we might need hydrogen fueling infrastructure and by when, and whether it's best to serve light duty, medium duty, or heavy duty. I will certainly mercilessly steal anything valuable from that to augment Odo's study. That when you talk about shipping, that raises a good question. And one of the benefits of having a hub at a shipping location is that you can get those, you can immediately take advantage of, for example, markets in Asia Pacific by perhaps exporting some hydrogen, perhaps turning it into ammonia beforehand. But then you can also provide charging for all of those vehicles that, as we talked about, are on site there, drayage vehicles, maybe even forklifts, whatnot. But really, I think in Oregon, we're looking at more the road transportation, and it is really early days. We are having conversations with other states, but they're all really informal. They're not codified in a way that is prioritized. And so I certainly agree with Dr. McAllister in terms of getting that bumped up as a priority I think is key.
Excellent. Yeah, no, I think you're right. I guess I want to kind of interject a sort of a separate infrastructure question that also is occurring with almost as much regularity here, which is related to hydrogen pipeline infrastructure. And do we use existing natural gas infrastructure? Do we see existing natural gas utilities likely to transition to hydrogen utilities? Is how much of that is actually necessary for storage and distribution of hydrogen? So Rebecca, while we've got you, I'll start with that. Would you care to comment on what do we think we need to do to establish pipeline infrastructure, and is that actually necessary and a path we should be going down?
I mean, that's a great question, and that touches on a few things. One, in Oregon, we have Northwest Natural. They have one of the most recently updated natural gas pipeline systems in the country. They're not going to have the same embrittlement issues as others, and they're still very cautious about how much they can add into the pipeline. And then, of course, you have the potential end using appliances. And questions about those. So injection questions in terms of standards and safety. There is but there is that expectation that for natural gas distribution systems that are older, have more steel, need to be upgraded, that it would be ideal to just have a dedicated system, as opposed to trying to upgrade a natural gas system. So one, though, I think that that's predicated on what we're assuming are the most, what role renewable hydrogen might be playing in our economy. Are those who think it's going to be a very niche application for those absolutely only positively can't decarbonize any other way sectors, but then there are those who think it's going to touch every part of our economy. And so I think that when you ask that question about the pipelines and the infrastructure, you are implicitly asking that question about how big of a role we are expecting it to play. And then I just would add that, at least in Oregon, and I'm sure everywhere, siting development of almost anything is really hard. We've been trying to build new transmission there forever, getting new projects. So, there is the opportunity that maybe you can use existing right-of-way with existing natural gas pipeline networks. And so maybe in that way, we are piggybacking on it, but it's still separate. But these are really the big questions that people are asking. I don't have the answer.
Yeah, no, I think that's right on target. And I've, I know, Jerry, we've had our natural gas infrastructure is definitely connected to that of BC. I've seen supply shortages impact both countries, back and forth. I'm curious if you see a lot of the same sorts of issues that Rebecca does, or if there's any of a different perspective at all from the Canadian side.
Well, pipelines are always a touchy topic in British Columbia, and right now, as many of you may know, we're still suffering the devastations of tremendous flooding and mudslides that have taken out big chunks of the pipeline, and the devastation that's left in its wake has been incredible. So there's, obviously there's a focus on pipelines and why they're important, but just the week before there was a massive pipeline protest north with a group of our Indigenous people. So I guess from my perspective, there's so many stakeholders and there's so many issues and there's so many different facets to this. We'll go back to an innovative solution. There's a company in BC called Lamazoo, and they do digital twinning, but they're doing digital twinning of lands or of mines or of pipelines to bring all the stakeholders in to do what if scenarios. And that seems to me a very interesting collaborative tool that where the impact on the environment, the impact on the land, the impact on all of the stakeholders, and what is necessary, what are the kinds of trade-offs, and what it shines a light on the entire system, as opposed to everyone trying to figure out their own particular needs. So it might be a helpful suggestion.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good thought. And the overall impact of the current natural gas infrastructure is something that has been called into question in many ways. A lot of people have become anti-natural gas, or have even started to say that hydrogen is kind of a way to keep that infrastructure in place. Brian, do you have any thoughts on, is this natural gas, is this injecting hydrogen into natural gas just something that's likely to keep the natural gas pipeline infrastructure around longer than it should be?
Oh, I don't know. I think there's a lot of, and I think Europe's probably ahead of us on this. A lot of learning to be done from others to see what is really possible, what kind of penetration you could really have. So I don't know, and I think it's early days for a lot of this on the West Coast, as some of the other speakers have talked about. There's a lot of learning to be done. I wouldn't take anything off the table at this point. I mean, infrastructure is infrastructure. It's sunk costs. If you can use it and use it to really meet your decarbonization goals, I think it has to be considered. I don't think we have enough understanding of what the potential for the existing natural gas grid is to say say one way or the other. So.
Yep. No, I think that's a fair point. Andrew, could you guys are just looking very seriously at the it sounds like a dedicated hydrogen pipeline going back and forth between Utah and other parts of the California infrastructure. Could you elaborate on that? Is that's related to natural gas infrastructure in any way, or is it its own thing?
Yeah, so as I understand it, the LA Intermountain Power conversion so they have in the Delta, Utah site where the existing power plant sits, they have water rights, they have a lot of space, they have existing transmission infrastructure. So the idea would be to generate hydrogen there with solar, and they've also got these underground salt caverns that are perfect for storing hydrogen. So they would generate at the site with hydrogen and then use the transmission lines to get that power to LA. Now, apart from that, High Deal in LA is also an effort to get the price down. I think their target is $1.50 a kilogram of hydrogen, that's for use in basin. And so just to quickly kind of build on something Rebecca said, really a lot depends on the infrastructure that's already in place. And so really the heavy lifting, the devil's in the details in a lot of this. And so mapping sort of the existing vintages of pipelines, both the grid, both the bulk pipelines and the retail pieces is kind of a necessary step to kind of understand what the possibilities are and the costs for making hydrogen part of that conversation. I do think the strategy that kind of makes sense is focus on those sites where you're most likely to have success, right? So an existing industrial corridor in LA seems pretty good in terms of, okay, we have a lot of thermal loads, they're going to be hard to electrify, let's kind of start there. And maybe, you build a short pipeline to transmit green hydrogen to a limited number of industrial customers and kind of make it work there and go on from there and build from that. So I think there's we have to start at point A. We don't exactly know what point B is, but we know generally the waypoint, the direction of that waypoint. So I think we can start walking towards it and learn as we go and start expanding from there. And I think that's kind of the intention of learning by doing that LA sort of has. And we have two very large gas utilities in California, and they're quite different in terms of their, one of them is actually a dual fuel, also does electricity, that's Pacific Gas and Electric, and then Southern California Gas Company, which serves pretty much the whole of sort of all the LA, most of Southern California except at San Diego. So, and they have different strategies and different directions in terms of their business models and their approach to hydrogen, business models generally, and their approach to hydrogen. So I think, it really is contextual. The solutions are going to be contextual, and we're going to have to sort of tease out the lessons from those experiences to be able to generalize.
Very good. Well, I think we're already a bit over time, and so I want to be respectful of everyone's time, and we'll probably just go ahead and end here. But thank you all for your insights and answering my questions, sometimes pointed, but appreciate your interaction and really look forward to collaborating up and down the West Coast. I think there's a lot of interesting things that we can do to really encourage this hydrogen corridor.
Thank you, Dr. Beaver. Really appreciate it.
Thank you,
everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all very much for an informative discussion that provided us with a top-down view of what your respective state or province is doing in the hydrogen space. I'm looking forward to hearing you all speak again. This concludes the program for session 1, and I want to thank the audience and all the speakers for joining us for day 1 of this conference hosted by NEDO and JETRO. I hope that today's webinar has been worthwhile, and we look forward to having you join us again on Monday, December the 6th, 3 p.m. Pacific time. In session 2, industry leaders from Japan and the Pacific West will discuss the challenges and opportunities for the private sector in building a new clean hydrogen economy. We hope to see you there. Finally, a questionnaire will appear on the screen when you leave the seminar. We would greatly appreciate if you could cooperate with that. Thank you very much.
NEDO